Hello and welcome to the next episode of Two Girls Talk Transit. Today we're reviewing the astrology from December 29th through January 4th, and we're your host. I'm Maddie.
And I'm Kaleigh.
And welcome back. So we're starting this week on Sunday, December 29th. Chiron is stationing direct in Aries. There's a lot of little Chiron aspects this week, but I thought it was worth talking about just because it's our one main outer planet going direct this week, and Mercury is also interacting with him later on. But this has been a long-term thing with Chiron and Aries, but the past retrograde, it's been over these particular degrees that I know very well because I have personal planets there. But it's been out to about 22nd degrees of Aries and it's retrograde back to 19 degrees of Aries, which are very personal to me. And so but we're finally wrapping that up. It was like that's been this like whole year. Chiron kind of goes over the same degrees over and over and over again, more than like three times, especially in Aries. So there may be some bigger womb kind of wrapping up the end of this year, especially if you have personal planets there, but it can also speak to this larger womb of the Aries archetype of like showing up, of going into battles and like putting yourself out there even when you're scared and like even when you're uncomfortable there.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to kind of illustrate what's going to happen. I'm trying to look now. My like ephemeris doesn't track Chiron, so I couldn't find any info about that, but I'm like running through the wheel now. Chiron is in Aries for literally like seems like till the end of time, but hold on. I'm going day by day. Maybe I need to switch it to months and see.
No, yeah, you need to go like by year. I know the ephemeris, I don't know why we track series, but we don't track
Chiron, yeah.
Chiron because like no one uses series. I mean,
I don't even know what that I honestly don't even know.
it's just like one of those like it's there's a good book on Demetra George of asteroid goddesses if you want to read about them, but like you wouldn't use series in isolation. You would use series with like Juno and Vesta,
One
Pallas,
to
you
other.
know,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think Chiron's leaving Aries for a couple years though.
Yeah, I see it here. In 2026, in July, it'll be at 0 degrees of Taurus.
Okay, okay. So we are getting on the rasp bit, but it will retrograde back, won't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it will retrograde back for several months. We just got to get, comfortable with it in Aries. So it seems like it does its final cycle. It completes that in April of 2027, and then it goes direct
Hmm.
to Taurus.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, mainly you really want to look at Chiron if you have like personal planets being interacted with it, then
Yeah.
you'll really notice. So like for me, at 19 degrees, which is where Chiron's stationary direct, I have my Mercury opposite in Libra at 19. So I've had about like five hits to my Mercury, and
Mhm.
Mercury rules my money.
That checks out.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I've just had a lot. It's not to say that I've not had money. I've always had money, but I definitely my relationship with money and my confidence with money has definitely been challenged. So it's like a personal womb around a belief, I feel like in Aries, or like what you perceive things to be and how you go and fight that battle.
Mm. Yeah, that's very interesting. I have mine squaring my Neptune
Mm.
at like 3 degrees. It's also squaring my midhaven and my IC at like 4 degrees. Yeah, so yeah, it is this like longer term wound. With me, my Neptune's in my ninth as well as my MC. Maybe it's like manifesting as like lack of clarity. I've always had this like lack of clarity with like spiritual beliefs. Like I don't know where I fall, like
Mm.
I
Yeah.
literally like I don't know. It's kind of like a belief in all and then like a belief in like nothing at all at the same time. Yeah,
That's That's very like a Chiron representation in your 12th, though, too.
yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. So, Anywho, yeah, like Maddie mentioned, it would be good to like check out, does Chiron have an aspect to any of your personal planets like the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus? Am I missing any? Sun, moon, Mercury, Venus. That's all right.
Mars, Jupiter.
Mars, yeah. Jupiter is considered an outer planet, no?
In modern, but I don't use it as an outer.
Use it, okay. So you can check your Mars and Jupiter also and just
Yeah. And
what
even your Saturn, like if it's aspecting your Saturn, like
be good to
that's
know
a
too. Yeah.
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 So I mean, but yeah, really any planet. If it is aspecting like your Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, I don't think you're gonna notice that as much.
Right.
Personally, you may notice that more in like the world that you're part of or the collective issues. And like this week, at least with it just stationing direct this week, I think collectively we're gonna feel this wound with like 2024 and like this fear perhaps stepping into the new year of
Mhm.
2025, you know?
I feel like that really checks out. Like I think we are like, Aries is very directional.
Mhm.
So it could be like fears regarding what direction the US is going to go in.
Right.
And I've noticed a lot of that. Like people are very scared to see like the next couple years play out. So I could definitely see, yeah, that coming to light in the collective.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's fitting with the other aspects we have this week too. So
Yeah.
we'll get to that. But next up on the Monday of December 30th, we have a new moon in Capricorn, which is actually our second new moon of December. But here it is. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the chart. But for audio, we have this new moon at 9 degrees of Capricorn here. There is not a lot of aspecting relationships. We can see some aspects that are going to be happening later in the week, but really this new moon kind of sits in quiet. And the first thing it's going to do is just sextile its ruler Saturn in Pisces. So I know last week we talked about Saturn a lot, and I think that's going to continue a bit into this week.
Right. Well, the new moon being in Capricorn anyways, ruled by Saturn, we're gonna get some Saturnian themes going on there. But Saturn is gonna bring up like you're gonna be thinking about plans about the long term, and it's very fitting with the time of the year, especially if you're in the US and any other countries that regard the January as the new year. I guess that's besides China. So anyhow. Yeah, so we're gonna just be thinking about like our long-term goals and plans for the future, and the moon being there, it's gonna be like an emotional experience of that, I think.
Yeah, the moon is in her sign opposite that she rules, so she's back in detriment, in Capricorn, where
Mm.
the emotions are kind of pushed aside. I always feel like in Capricorn, there's a bit of that push-pull because, like, on one hand, in Capricorn season, it is very much like a kind of Cancer element where you're all together at home and you're like, decorating your home and you're supporting your guys' self emotionally. But it's like the Capricorn element is like it's the new year, so you got to get your goals straight. You got to get your life straight. You got to look back over your whole past year, and then like kind of be judgmental and harsh and Saturnian on yourself, like rating yourself. Did you do all the things that you wanted to do? And then, looking forward, planning out like what restrictions do I have to put on myself? What limitations do I have to now meet for my next goals to actually be possible? It's kind of, I always just think this new moon, like whenever it falls in like December, it's just interesting. Like in January, I feel like it's more fitting because you're like, okay, let's just get pushing on things, but when it's in December, you're still kind of caught in between, like, I just want to rest, but
Mhm.
also I feel this impending doom.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, though. It's like, to your point about the opposition about like the moon being in Cancer or being in Capricorn, the moon being in Cancer very much represents like contentment, like you're
Mhm.
content with your surroundings, and even so much to the point where you're feeling cozy, like
Right.
it's like I'm so cozy and content with my life, where Capricorn's the complete opposite experience. Capricorn moon says, I'm not there yet, like
Yeah.
I need to put those things in place. And, you know, like I'm not at the point of contentment. It's completely opposite.
Exactly. And so just this new moon happening like right after Christmas. I mean, it is fitting. I think it's just going to kind of spark a lot of action the start of January, which we'll see with like these aspects going exact. Um, but it is like it's a discomfort, I think, and that's fitting with Chiron stationing direct too. It's like
Mhm.
I'm unhappy. This is a wound. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to continue this path. So I have to create this new direction. It involves more of the Saturnian influence.
Yeah, yeah, I think I would have said probably something very similar. Yeah, it's like the direction that we've been going seems totally opposite to where we want to go. So,
Mm,
yep, we need some like now we need to create a plan. And I've seen
yeah.
people on TikTok doing these like no buy 2025s.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, have you seen any of those?
I've been kind of off social media lately.
For the best, honestly, but I think it is. It's like realizing that, like, oh, I actually didn't want to, do that with my finances, or actually didn't want to go in that direction. So let me create a plan that allows me to go in the direction I want to go in.
Yeah, so I mean, and really practically, this is a really good new moon to be goal setting, to be planning, to be intentional, especially like on if you really want to be clear with it, 6 month plan, because the full moon in Capricorn will be able to show you, the peak of your intentions within the middle of the year. So it's a good new moon for that kind of real clear setting the stricts and boundaries and new intentions. So I
Yeah,
think that's at least positive.
I agree. Yeah.
Uh, right around the same day of that new moon, or really on the 31st, so New Year's Eve on Tuesday, Mercury will just trine Chiron, and it's like right about to leave its shadow period too. So we're finally wrapping up all of Mercury's retrograde in Sagittarius. I just thought that trine to Chiron was interesting, given that Chiron stationed direct earlier this week.
Hmm.
And there's that communication element, Mercury delivering the messages of the Chiron womb to you, perhaps linking those two fire signs in your chart, or even the full fire trigon you have going on. But really, Aries, Sagittarius, like what did the Mercury retrograde show that was a wound for you? Like what brought up, what was reviewed there that showed you that, hey, that's also a pain point still, too.
Mm. I mean, it is kind of on time, we're getting that information of that pain point, and it might be a little bit reflective, also. Like, I was shown this earlier with the Mercury retrograde. I'm remembering it again. How do I
Mm.
want to, go into the new year? Um, it's interesting because I feel like, we always have this like celebration for the New Year's, but I don't know about you, but I always feel like um not sad, but it's kind of like it like holds space for both, like the ending of the year ahead and like the beginning of the new one. It's like there's kind of mixed emotions surrounding it. It's not just all like woohoo.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that because I've like personally just want to put my personal bias out there. Like I hate Capricorn season generally. Just because it's like in that square to my stellium. And I always like I do a lot of stuff. Like we started this podcast about a year ago almost in Capricorn season. We were like looking at our birth chart. And
Yeah.
like I do a lot of stuff. I do a lot of work, but I also, think too, like the element of this year is like sometimes I just feel like Capricorn is just such that goody two shoes, but like bootlicker, like capitalistic sign where it's like, yes, what's the
Yeah.
future? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing next? What are you doing next? Like, what's your plan? What's your goal? Like I'm not saying that's all Capricorns, but I'm just saying like our capitalistic society really like pushes that energy and like rewards it versus like there is an element of Capricorn season of it just being the seed, like just being the tiny little start, the tiny true intention and like nurturing that intention, not forcing it
Yeah.
as, like really highly capitalistic goal oriented society likes. I don't
Right.
know.
That is true. Yeah, Capricorn has to put in like the long sustained effort. I did notice, like, I've mentioned this before, but with every season, you kind of get to know, like with every sun sign shift into a new season, you kind of get to know that sign a little bit more.
Mm,
And I myself have like started forming some new like longer term goals. And I never understood like more like Saturnian people, like people that are like, I'm going to be so strict onto this goal and like I'm going to be so strict, like not spend any money on anything extra and not like eat anything I'm not supposed to. And I'm like always thinking that seems miserable. I don't know who would want to do that. But in this season in particular, I've realized like, oh, I like you do those things so you can feel proud of yourself. Like
yeah,
for accomplishing them. And yeah, I don't know. It is like Capricorn is that like you want to feel proud of yourself,
right.
where that like kind of like corporate server, like servantness. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah,
Like
the
comes in.
servitude of aspect and like knowing that you are of value, right? Like cardinal, it's a cardinal sign that's of Earth, and Earth is like our tangible values and resources. And it's like you are the leader of these values. Like that is your ego, that is your sun in Capricorn, like, and that's not wrong. It's not any different or wrong than the other signs. It's just like, I do feel like it fits in better with our current capitalistic society.
Oh, it does for sure. Yeah.
But and also, that is a value to be able to be so clear about what the long-term step is that each day that you just have to work harder than everyone else and you will succeed. Like it's an if and in both. Yeah.
I know it. Yeah, capitalism is not great, but it is very, yeah, it's very Capricorn for sure.
I also think too, like just one last thought is like it kind of is like the dopamine chemical. Like so you're like dopamine, you get dopamine when you complete something, when you finish a task.
You do. Yeah.
And so you can get dopamine by having a drug addiction, and just every time you satisfy that drug addiction, you complete that task, right? And that's more of a bad, negative way of doing it because you're not actually generating anything. You can also get dopamine by setting these goals for yourself and setting these standards for yourself and like being very clear about completing those tasks. And then that's like, it's like, which way do you choose to go? Like you have to satisfy that chemical in some way. Like if you do it this long term, less fun way, it's actually a better result in the long run.
Right. Yeah, I think those like the people try to do like dopamine hacks,
Oh yeah,
giving
no,
yourself like
it's
little
bullshit.
pieces of gratification along the way. Oh goodness. Yeah, but
Uh,
yeah, Capricorn season really does teach you, if anything, like you gotta go to the end, like
yeah,
you gotta keep putting in the work and putting in the effort, and that's really when you're gonna see the rewards of it. I feel like Capricorn season, if you do have like a win in this season, it's gonna be from your actions previously that you've been like spending a lot of time on. And it's like finally, like you've reached the rewards of this.
yeah,
But you are like, if it's a short-term thing, I don't see like a lot of success coming out of it because it's like Capricorn wants you to like be like continuously doing it, even when you see it's like barren lands of success.
yeah. It is. It is. So I don't know. I think that's the kind of thing you're coming up against because like Chiron and Aries is definitely more quick and fast success and instantaneous results.
I run
And
an
so
energy to say like, let's get over these problems. I'm tired of it.
yeah, and they want it done now versus Capricorn's like, but it's necessary. So that's probably the conflict or part of the conflict that's coming up for this week with these aspects.
Yeah, that's a good point to make.
But we get a little bit of help. Venus does enter Pisces on January 2nd, my favorite placement ever.
Oh, she's getting a payday.
I just love a little exalted Venus. She is co-present with Saturn, so it's not she still has to work a bit. She's not getting free for all down
Right.
there.
But it's gonna like soften up those like more Saturnian things. It's gonna make it feel good. Like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
putting in this work. It actually like feels good while I'm doing it. So I think that's good too. Exalted Venus. We're getting a lot of help from Venus here. So
Yeah, it is. Like to your point, the Saturn work, the Saturn intentions actually have a lot of support,
Hmm.
with Venus here and even being in a sextile to Capricorn. So like there is this just ease and flow. And get like Venus here for about a month. So or a little bit longer maybe, but so it's really good for at least having the effort or the ability to go after what you set out to do or what your intentions were with that new moon.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So the only thing about Venus and Capricorn is like lack of, or Venus and Pisces, sorry, is like lack of boundaries and the ability to be drawn every which way too sometimes. And so go
But
ahead.
I wonder how much we'll be experiencing that though, since it's co-present with Saturn. I wonder if that's
Well,
gonna kind of.
no, you're right. I just felt like for myself, the shift of it into Capricorn has showed me where I have been with my Saturnian like pieces too wishy-washy. And
Hmm.
like, Saturn in Pisces can be one that seeks more formless and trying to put up boundaries in the water is harder. And sometimes you can just be like, I'll do that later.
Hmm.
And so I think that with the new moon in Capricorn, there's a need to like also put more strength and boundaries in Pisces areas. Um, but Venus there being exalted can kind of help that be more flowing time. So it's just an idea, like just if you feel like you are being too stressed then because everything looks good, like everything looks fun, everything looks tasty, like I want a piece of all of that. You gotta like reel it back in just a little.
Hmm. Yeah. But I feel like, yeah, you'll definitely be supported to like reel it back in, you
Yeah.
know. It's so interesting that we have Christmas actually in Capricorn season because, people can kind of like get away with themselves at Christmas and like, like give too much, and which is like Venus
Yeah.
Pisces, like I gave too much, you know. Um,
Right.
yeah, so it's interesting. I wonder if people will be like, when Venus meets Saturn later, maybe they'll feel like, oh, I actually overdid it a bit.
Perhaps. Perhaps. The
Mhm.
worst though, I mean we get that, but she's not really much help right now, I will say, because we also have on January 2nd, that Thursday, Mars comes back opposite Pluto. So Mars is still retrograde in Leo, and now it's going to be opposite Pluto in Aquarius. So it is similar to our first Mars Pluto opposition that we had in early November, which was right around the election day. But it's different because Mars is in Leo. And I'm actually more concerned about this one because Mars in Cancer didn't have a lot of power. It was more about just being caught up in it and like, your body, your life is just happening. It's happening to you. You're caught up in this. But Mars in Leo is like your ego and your drive fighting Pluto head to head. I just think it's going to be more destructive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how it plays out. I don't have much awareness around this in like my personal life at the moment. But maybe that will come to light when Mars, moves backwards. Uh,
I have a lot of awareness, but I don't know if I'm comfortable sharing it on the podcast. So,
mm, I get that. I get that. My Mars is in my fourth house right now in Leo. Moving retrograde. I don't know. I mean, I always feel like I want to move. Like, I don't know. So that's like like an always present feeling. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it pans out. But yeah, anyways, just know that, we've had a couple of hits of this Mars opposite Pluto. This is another one you're gonna get. And Mars, we talked about this before, but Mars will retrograde back in Cancer and then it'll come forward again in Leo. So we're gonna get another hit of this Mars opposite Pluto. So it's an interesting checkpoint.
yeah, I have a good example from one of my monthly readings.
Mhm.
Um, but I would also, if you really want to be more clear about this, go all the way back to the Mars station. So Mars station retrograding December 6th. And, whenever you kind of experienced around that time, it was still in a very close opposition with Pluto. And so now it's just completing that opposition with Pluto. So it's kind of been this buildup of like what you've kind of really put forth energy into the start of December. You're
Hmm.
hitting this peak point of like growth and opposition and change. So like this person had Mars in Leo, her natal Mars is in Leo, a lot of intense action and drive and change around her career. She wants to change the work she's doing, she wants to redirect.
Wait, so
And that's
what house?
10th house, sorry.
So
Sorry,
the
yeah,
no,
career 10th house, yeah.
she's having a return, like a Mars. Is it Mars
Yeah,
return?
it's not exact. Her Mars is a little bit later in the sign, so it
Okay.
hasn't quite reached, but in least Hellenistic whole sign astrology, when two planets are in the same sign, they're definitely activating each other.
Mm.
And in the 10th house, there was a lot of desire for change in career, a redirection in career, trying out different things. And then the fourth house is that, there's all this pressure to buy a house. To the Pluto is in the fourth in Aquarius. There's
Mhm.
also all this pressure to buy a house to get out of their living situation, which is living with family at the moment. But, she could just stay at a traditional current job that she has, but that's not satisfying her Mars, who wants to go after more and
Mhm.
have that identity. A 10th house Leo really wants to have your identity as the center of your work, but there's
Yeah.
this power dynamics around how your work controls your living, so it's kind of flipped of yours, but it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, yeah, with Mars there, we will definitely that, like I said before, I said that earlier, is like Mars is very directional. So
Yeah.
maybe some of us are like realizing like we need to reroute or we want to go in a different direction in some way. That could be a lot of like the retrograde is like figuring out
Mm-hmm.
what direction do we want to go in.
Yeah, you're like reviewing the retrograde of the Leo house, like whatever from all of December, whatever Mars has been retrograding in Leo has been a really big kind of review or redirection of your actions. And now hitting Pluto is kind of like your big test, like can you get past this? Can you like overcome this? Can you actually meet the demands and do what you want to do? Or do you lose that power?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So collectively, oh God. Um,
Yeah, collectively we're a mess always, but what can you do,
Chris Bennett said it best, like a lot of gruesome, horrific things. Uh,
What was some that he did mention some, and I can't remember. I just remember he talked about like Saturn and Pisces was was putting restrictions on the endless strip at Red Lobster.
yeah.
I thought that was his, but that's not even.
I mean, oh God. I mean, there was a lot of just like from the first aspect, there was just a lot of like really, dark and gruesome issues. And I mean, there were people speculated a lot of power issues. I think personally, things going on with the Luigi case
Yeah.
is really obvious to the Mars opposite Pluto because, like, you have the collective on one end and then like the government doing something totally different, and they are not agreeing to each other at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point because Pluto in Aquarius, like we have it right now, is very much like for the people. It wants to be like, it wants to reform the system so that we can create better things communally. So that
Mm-hmm.
Mars, Pluto opposition was like, I'm going to kill the people that aren't for the people, like
Right.
it's like I'm done with this. Like we're going to have justice here.
Yeah, it is very much that. And two, what I think is interesting is that this Mars point is pulling the secrets out of Pluto. Like I kind of noticed this, I was kind of paying attention to this because I do really think it's tied to the cycle. But like how they're treating Luigi's case, there's no precedent to it. They're not following any protocol. They're not following anything normal. They're doing these weird, like even his lawyer, and it was like released a day or two ago when his lawyer was doing the hearing. Like, hey, I've never seen this in my entire career. This perp walk, the mayor of New York, who has a pending case against him for fraud and other horrific things, walking next to this perp like it's some fucking show on the Joker. Like, what are we doing?
There is no, like, I don't know what we're doing half the time. So it's like, it's just ridiculous at this point.
And it's like, but it's just like these actions that they're taking are like making everyone see more clearly the corruption within the government, the
Hmm.
lies or the ways that they put on a show
Hmm.
that are, not true or not actually, there's them overstepping their power of the collective, which is Pluto.
Yeah, that's very good. That's a very good point. Pluto and Aquarius in general, we're going to see a lot of holes in the government system and a lot of, because I really know, like my day job, I work within the system. So,
Mm,
it's not black and white like we want it to be. It's really not.
no.
And it makes it really unfair for a large number of people. So, hopefully this Pluto and Aquarius might bring up some of the darker things like we need to address in order to make it fairer for people.
Yeah, so I think long term, just with starting with this aspect when Mars goes opposite Pluto, but then as we do transition into Aquarius season, the secrets of that are going to become out and just going to keep coming out. Like people are not going to just take what they say at face value anymore.
No, like you said, that Aquarius season is really going to illuminate a lot of like what we have in store for this Pluto transit over the next 20 years.
Yeah. So that is our big aspect for the week. Like that's the one to be watching, and you will be feeling this like from the start of this week. It's all transits are kind of like a bell curve. If you know statistics, like a bell curve. So the top of the bell curve, the very top, is when the transit goes exact. And that's what we talk about here on this podcast. But each point of the week, before, a couple days before, and a couple days after, are still very much affected by that transit. So
Yeah. Yeah.
just keep that in mind.
Mhm.
Be careful with your New Year's celebrations, basically.
Yes, I would agree.
So let's just wrap up this week then on the 4th, which is the Saturday of January. The sun will just sextile Saturn. And that is kind of a repeat or retouch on the new moon in Capricorn. What structures do you have? What work do you have to do? And being clear about setting boundaries for yourself about that.
Yeah, but basically we got some emotional awareness of which direction we want to go.
Mm,
Sometimes like those moon ruled things, it's like this inner feeling like we know we want to go towards it, but it hasn't quite reached the point where we're like decided yet. Like we just start like feeling the emotional hits of it. And I feel like the sun making that sextile, it's going to be like a light bulb kind of like, okay, like I really need to like, do, what I emotionally felt like I needed to do.
that's a good point. Yeah. Whenever it's like the new moon, it's kind of more of this internal shift or pull. And then now with the sun actually making those aspects of Saturn is like, let's get to work. Let's do the thing now. Like, here's your plan of attack now,
Right.
you know.
I totally agree.
So that's pretty much all I have for this week. Yeah, I don't know. Just stay safe with that Mars Pluto opposition.
Yeah, because that's happening. Mars Pluto is happening two
In a
days.
second.
Yeah. Okay, so at least it's like after the new year, like hopefully we won't see.
No, I think it's still gonna be activated at the new year. Like what I was talking about before. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'd be cautious. Maybe like spend it at home or like with people you feel safe with.
I
But
mean, you can do what you want to do, but I think with like the Mars being in Leo, you just need to double check yourself when you do things. Like Leo is ourself, it's our actions, it's our way we, just like double check in. Like,
yeah, that's a
am
good,
I okay with the consequences of these actions?
right, right.
Yeah.
That's a good point to make. So, yeah, that's pretty much all for this week. Maddie and I did want to mention that if you're interested in learning astrology, we have our 6-month program. This program is unique, probably a little bit different than some of the things you'll find out there because we work one-on-one with you. There's a lot of technical stuff which Maddie will teach. You need to know the technique and the specifics, and Maddie's really good with that. And we need to also apply some abstractness too, which is like where I come in, and then we work on like reflecting on your chart and how different transits have affected you. We do some life review and just begin to understand like the language of astrology in general. So it's a really beautiful program for anybody who's interested in like diving headfirst into the study.
Yeah, and I'll just say too, there are a lot of astrology courses out there, and there are a lot of really great astrology courses out there, but this is not necessarily just a course. This is kind of like a mentorship. This is kind of like this one-on-one learning with us directly, because it's live online, and we're both doing our own work alongside of you. And you can ask questions in real time, you can get feedback in real time, and you can actually learn and grow with others with a smaller group. So there's multiple ways to learn astrology, but if you like the more interactive, which I do, I like community, I like the interactive, I like cultivating friendships and relationships within the astrology community, then
Mhm.
this is really kind of what we're cultivating with this program for the next 6 months. So
Yeah, I think that's really great. Yeah, so if you're interested in that, we have the links to fill out an application. Our links are found on both our Instagram and our TikTok, Two Girls Talk Transits. So yeah, if you fill out an application, we will be in touch via email. But yeah, we're really excited for the start of that.
yeah, it starts January 19th, and I'll also have the application linked in the show notes of both the podcast and the YouTube. So just check us out, and then check us out, Two Girls Talk Transits, for content. All right.
Alrighty.
See you next week.
See you.
Bye.